What's up everyone? For today's movie, I will tell you a story of a great pilot, that willing to risk everything, even his own life, for his passengers to survive. But before that, if you haven't subscribed yet, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more recap movies like this. Thank you, and just relax out there, and allow me to tell you what happened in this movie with the title Plane. The film starts in Singapore, with Captain Brodie Torrance calling his daughter named Daniela, and said that he intends to arrive home in Honolulu to spend time with her for the holidays. It is then told that Brodie, who was a former RAF pilot, is going to fly Trailblazer Airlines Flight 119. And when he arrived there, he met with his co-pilot named Dele, who greets and informs him that they are going to fly through a very bad weather. Then, the chief flight attendant named Bonnie informs Brodie that he is needed to meet Officer Shellback. The officer then informs him that they are transporting a prisoner named Louis Gasparre, who was a former French Foreign Legion soldier. Later on, 14 passengers arrived and boards the plane, including young social media influencers, a snooty businessman, lovers, and others. The two influencers then takes a selfie of them with Louis on the background, and because of that, he gets angry and tells them not to take a picture of him. While in the air, Brodie and Dele talk to each other, with Brodie mentioning his daughter Daniela, and how his wife had passed years earlier. Unfortunately, as they pass over the South China Sea, the plane encounters heavy turbulence when it passes through the storm. The storm then gets worse and worse, leading to the plane suffering damage from lightning, and Brodie injures his head in the commotion. Meanwhile, a stewardess died when she tried to help Shellback, but Shellback also died after being slammed around when the plane starts going down. Then, Brodie and Dele have to manage control without communications and radar, and bring the plane to a safer balance. But they realize that the damages are too heavy, and they only have minutes remaining, so they need to make an emergency landing as soon as possible. Luckily, the pilots finds an island and manage to land in it on the nick of time. Once everything settles, Brodie has the passengers get out of the plane, and tells them that maybe they're in the southern part of the Philippines. Brodie then tries to keep Louis away and secured from the other passengers due to his violent history, while he works with Dele and Bonnie to keep the passengers calm and to find a way to call for help. After that, he goes inside the plane and gets the items of Louis from Shellback's body, that puts in a body bag along with the body of the stewardess. Then, Brodie and Dele learn that they are on the Jolo Island located in the Philippines, but Dele tells Brodie that it is a bad news and they can't get any help from the people there, cause the island is operated by violent separatists, meaning they risk putting everyone in danger, the longer they stay there. In another instance, at the headquarters of Trailblazers in New York City, the board of directors having a meeting, and is met by their crisis manager named Scarsdale, to try and locate the plane and the passengers. He then suggested that they need to hire mercenaries, in order to search and rescue all the crews and passengers of their plane. After that, a man's seen running and tells to the leader of the island named Datu Junmar, that he saw a plane that seems to be landing nearby. So, Datu Junmar immediately orders his men to go at the site and check on it. Meanwhile, Brodie tells to his crew and passengers, that they needs to search for the area and tries to find a way to contact their company and ask for help. Then, he decides to release Louis and bring him into the forest as they're hoping to find any ways of communications. But in the middle of their journey, Louis escapes and left him alone in the middle of nowhere. Back in New York City, Scarsdale and the board review Brodie's history file, featuring a video of an incident, where Brodie held an aggressive passenger in a chokehold until he passed out, after the man punched Brodie when he tried to calm down an altercation. Scarsdale then plans to send the mercenary team to rescue everyone once the plane is tracked, since they knew of the threat on the island. Meanwhile, in Honolulu, Daniela's aunt informs her of the news that her father's plane went down and missing. Later on, Brodie reaches an abandoned building, where he manages to find a phone and contact an agent from Trailblazers. But the agents originally doesn't believe him, because she claims that they have been getting lots of prank calls over the missing flight. Though he insists that he's telling the truth, the agents didn't believe him, until the call was cut off. Then, Brodie also manages to call Daniela, but he got attacked by one of the men of Datu Junmar. Brodie fights the man desperately, but he overpowers him. Luckily, Louis came and killed the man and the other men outside, and they come to a conclusion that the men might be some kind of rebels. And upon further inspection of the building, Brodie and Louis sees that the rebels used the area to torture and videotape their victims for ransom money. After realizing that the passengers and crews are in danger, the two immediately rush back to the plane, but finds that Datu Junmar and his men have already made it there. So, Louis urged Brodie not to try and be a hero, and watch carefully on what's happening. The rebels then asks for the list of all the passengers and who is the captain, so Dele tells that he is the one in charge since their captain is gone and looking for help. Then, a Korean woman attempts to flee, only for one of the rebels to shoot her dead. Her husband is crying angrily because of what the rebels did, but he is then brutally decapitated by Datu Junmar himself. And after that, the rebels proceed to take everyone else hostage, and force them to ride in a bus. Meanwhile, Brodie and Louis couldn't do anything and wait for the rebels to leave. After a while, Datu Junmar left and orders his two men to follow them after they get all the belongings of the passengers and crew. Because of that, the two seize an opportunity to attack the remaining rebels, and learn that Datu Junmar is taking everyone to a nearby village. Brodie and Louis then resolve to follow and rescue them. But before they leave, Brodie leaves a message inside the plane using white cloth, saying that they're going to rescue the hostages, along with their location. As the two head out to the village, Datu Junmar and his men starts forcing the hostages to state the names and countries for their ransom video. Meanwhile, the mercenary team arrives on the island but they find nobody near the plane, and only the bodies of Shellback and the stewardess, along with a message from Brodie. In another instance, Brodie and Louis makes it to the village and manages to kill some rebels, before locating and freeing the hostages. Then, they tell them that there are no help coming for them, so they need to go back in the plane and use it to leave the island. After that, everyone gets boarded into the bus, while Brodie stays behind to be a decoy so the others can get out. And when he shows himself to the rebels, Datu Junmar and his men beat him and prepare to execute him. Luckily, the mercenary team shows up and begins to open fire on the rebels, as they manages to rescue Brodie in the process. Then, everyone gets inside the bus to leave the village and goes to where the plane is. After the fight, Datu Junmar grieves on the body of his dead brother, that drive his cause against the foreigner, and decides to attack and hunts them at full force. Later on, everyone makes it back to where the plane is. And as they're planning to use it, Brodie tells them to trust him once again, and he's going to get them out of there for sure. Meanwhile, at the Trailblazers headquarters, the board argues about having Brodie to fly the plane since it is so damaged and could potentially kill everyone on board. Back at the island, the leader of the mercenary shows Brodie that there are a lot of rebels coming on their way, and they needs to leave as soon as possible. Then, Brodie tells him that they needs to buy him some time for him to fix the brakes of the plane. So, all the mercenary together with Louis, will position themselves to defend and fight the incoming rebels. And when the passengers are boarding the plane, the rebels arrives and the fierce battle started. Unfortunately, one of the passenger gets shot, but they manages to get him inside the plane. As the rebels' forces are still coming, Louis and the mercenary team have the advantage and manages to kill almost of them. Then, when Brodie finishes to fix the brake, he decides to board the plane and tells them that he will leave the stairs down, and once he starts the engine, they only have 2 minutes to board the plane. Brodie then runs toward the plane but Datu Junmar shot him in his leg. Luckily, they cover for him, so he manages to board inside the plane safely. Then, he immediately starts the engine together with Dele, and the only way for them to communicate with the Trailblazers headquarters is a single radiophone that he gets from the mercenary. The mercenary team then runs onto the plane while it starts to move. But Louis decides to stay and bring the bag of the mercenary that full of money with him, cause he knew that once it is over, they will treat him again as a prisoner. With most of the rebels dead, Brodie and Dele make an effort to get the plane moving. Datu Junmar and his men then attempts to fire an RPG at the plane. So, Louis helped them one last time by shotting the man who's holding the RPG. But Datu Junmar never gives up in pursuing him and decides to shot the plane himself. Brodie then lifts it high enough in the air that kills Datu Junmar by smashing into him with the plane's wheels. After that, Brodie tells to the headquarters that they need to find him a nearest landing area that they can land immediately, cause they only have few fuels left and the engine are in failure too. Then, they tells him that there are only one nearby, which is the airstrip in Sea. After a bit of turbulence and a breathtaking scene, Brodie manages to safely land the plane again in the nick of time, causing everyone, including the people at the headquarters, to cheer and express their happiness. All of the crew and passengers then thanks Brodie and gives him a hand of applause for what he did for them. And as the rescuer arrives at the scene, and the passengers settle down, Brodie sits to call his daughter Daniela, and let her know that he is coming home. And that's the end of the story. Thank you for watching everyone, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. See you in our next movie recap.